At Pinnacle First Bank, Ruth Daniels found herself waiting for 2 long hours as the manager's demeanor shifted when board members walked in. What started as a routine banking appointment soon became a shocking display of blatant discrimination, sparking a life-changing confrontation. How will Ruth, a strong yet humble Black entrepreneur, handle this disrespect? And what happens when the board members walk in and witness the truth for themselves? Stick around to find out. And don't forget to comment below where you're watching from today. Also, like and subscribe for more eye-opening stories. Ruth adjusted her blazer and confidently walked into the grand marble lobby of Pinnacle First Bank. Her heels clicked sharply on the polished floors, echoing the rhythm of a woman who had earned her success through years of hard work and determination. Today, she was securing the final piece of financing for her latest real estate project, a community-focused housing development set to transform the neighborhood she grew up in. Approaching the front desk with a calm smile, she greeted the teller. "Good morning. I'm Ruth Daniels here for a 10 a.m. meeting with Mr. Porter." The teller glanced at the screen, then at Ruth, her smile faltering slightly as she processed the name. "Let me inform Mr. Porter that you've arrived," she said, then added, "Please have a seat, Miss Daniels." Ruth nodded, taking a seat in one of the sleek leather chairs in the waiting area. It was 9:55 a.m., and Ruth, always valuing efficiency, was ahead of schedule. She checked her phone, skimming through her notes. The loan was practically a done deal. Her immaculate credit score and strong business portfolio meant this meeting was a formality, though Ruth understood the importance of appearances. As the minutes passed, Ruth noticed the teller glance nervously in her direction, then whisper to a colleague at 10 a.m. She remained composed, but her chest tightened. At 10:30 a.m., Ruth decided to inquire. Walking back to the counter, she asked in a polite but firm tone, "Excuse me, I just wanted to confirm if Mr. Porter knows I'm here." The teller flustered, replying, "Yes, ma'am, he's aware. He's finishing up with another task. He'll be with you shortly." Ruth nodded, though her patience was wearing thin. She returned to her seat, crossed her legs, and sat up straighter, noticing other customers being attended to promptly. The clock mocked her professionalism as time continued to pass. At 11 a.m., Ruth stood up, her voice carrying a sharper edge. "It's been an hour past my appointment time, and I'd like to know what's causing the delay." The teller hesitated before picking up the phone. After a brief conversation, she put the receiver down and said, "Mr. Porter will be out shortly." Another half-hour passed before the bank manager, Samuel Porter, emerged. His arrogance was apparent, and his navy suit, perfectly tailored, and slicked-back hair only added to his dismissive attitude. Approaching Ruth with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, he apologized. "Sorry for the wait. We've been swamped." Ruth met his gaze, unwaveringly. "I had a 10 a.m. appointment. It's now 11:45. Let's proceed," she replied. He gestured toward his office, and as they walked past the tellers, Ruth couldn't help but notice the exchanged glances from the staff. Inside his office, Porter took his time settling into his chair, arranging papers as if Ruth had nothing better to do. "What can I do for you today, Miss Daniels?" he asked, leaning back. Ruth held her ground. "I believe you know I'm here to finalize the loan for the Franklin Heights development. All documents should be in your system." Porter clicked through his computer screen before commenting, Yes, the Franklin Heights project. Quite an undertaking." Ruth replied, her tone steady. "Yes, but as you'll see, I've met all the requirements. My business plan, financial records, and projections have been reviewed and approved by your underwriting team. This is the final step." Porter's lips curled into a thin smile.
"I see.
"These things take time, Miss Daniels. I'll need to review everything again to ensure there are no discrepancies." Ruth countered, "I was informed that the loan was approved, pending my signature." Porter responded with condescension. "Yes, but I prefer to look things over personally. You understand, of course." Ruth bit the inside of her cheek, her anger simmering, but she refused to let him see it. "Take all the time you need," she said smoothly. "I'll wait right here." Porter's smile faltered slightly, but he nodded and turned back to his screen. The minutes dragged on, each one mocking her patience as Porter clicked leisurely through her files, asking irrelevant questions. By 12:45 p.m., Ruth could no longer remain silent. She stood up, forcing Porter to look up in surprise. "Mr. Porter, I value professionalism and respect, and I expect the same from those I do business with. If there's an issue with my application, please address it directly. Otherwise, I believe we've wasted enough time." Porter's demeanor shifted to defensive arrogance. "I assure you, Miss Daniels, I'm just doing my due diligence," Ruth replied, her voice firm, "and I assure you, I recognize a delay tactic when I see one. If my business is unwelcome here, I'll take it elsewhere." Before Porter could respond, a knock at the door interrupted. A junior employee, Erin, poked her head in, apologizing. "Excuse me, Mr. Porter, the regional board members have arrived." Porter's face drained of color, and he stood abruptly, smoothing his tie. "Of course," he stammered. "Please show them to the conference room. I'll be there shortly." Erin paused before adding, "Actually, one of the board members specifically asked to see Ms. Daniels." Ruth's curiosity piqued as she exchanged glances with Porter. His discomfort was palpable as he turned to Ruth, saying, "It seems you have quite the connections, Miss Daniels." With composure, Ruth straightened, following Erin out of the office. The tension was thick as they walked toward the executive conference room, and employees watched them in silence. The doors to the room were open, revealing a group of well-dressed board members, engaged in conversation. At the center stood Thomas Grayson, a tall, silver-haired man whose presence commanded attention. When he spotted Ruth, his face lit up with a warm smile. "Ruth," he called out. "It's been too long." Ruth greeted him warmly, returning his smile. The other board members exchanged curious glances, clearly intrigued by the familiarity between them. "You're looking well," Ruth said as she sat down. Grayson turned to the group. "Everyone, I'd like to introduce you to Ruth Daniels, one of the sharpest minds in real estate development. Her Franklin Heights project is the kind of forward-thinking investment we need." Porter, now standing awkwardly by the door, stepped forward, trying to take control of the situation. "Ruth and I were just finalizing the details of her loan application," he interjected. "It's a complex project, and I'm ensuring all due diligence is completed." Ruth raised an eyebrow, her voice neutral but subtly challenging. "That's an interesting way to describe it." Grayson, sharp-eyed, turned to Ruth. "Is that so? How's the process been from your perspectives?" Ruth took a deep breath, then replied, "The underwriting team has been thorough, but the final steps have been unnecessarily delayed." Porter's discomfort was evident as he defended himself. "I've been meticulous in my review. We have to ensure all procedures are followed." Grayson leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on Porter. "Meticulous, you say?" "Ruth, did you have an appointment scheduled for this morning?" Ruth answered firmly, "Yes, at 10 a.m. I arrived early." Grayson, his tone pointed, asked, "And what time is it now?" Ruth glanced at her watch. "It's nearly 1 p.m. A murmur rippled through the room. Grayson turned to Porter, his voice steady but cutting. "Samuel, I trust there's a very good reason why one of our most promising clients was left waiting for 3 hours." Porter's face flushed, but he didn't answer. Grayson turned to Ruth. "Would you excuse us for a moment? I'd like to speak with Mr. Porter in private." Ruth nodded and stepped outside. As she waited in the hallway, she could hear the muffled sounds of Grayson's raised voice, but she allowed herself a small smile. The barriers she faced were still there, but moments like these proved that change was possible.